Welcome to the BDA Tech Summit for 2021. My name is Jerome Wilson, and I am a partner and head of Appleby's Technology and Innovation Practice in Bermuda. Our global tech practice, which is ranked Tier 1 by Bermudas Global, is comprised of experts across all 10 of our offices. On this session, members of our Bermuda technology team will provide a high-level overview of the digital asset business space in Bermuda. As an added bonus, we'll also be joined by a key client who will share his experiences and views on Bermuda's DABA licenses and the process for being licensed. We'll also be joined by an advisor with experience in the Bermuda market who will share his thoughts on the future of fintech and what it holds for Bermuda. I'm sure you'll find these discussions enlightening. Up next is Matt Ebbs-Brewer, who is also a partner in the team. Matt will give a general overview of the DABA legislation in Bermuda. Matt will be followed by Kit, who will be speaking to our client, which is Bittrex Global. And Kit will be followed by myself, who will be speaking with Sean Stapley of Penrose Partners. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Thanks again for joining us. Our team looks very much forward to connecting with you during the conference. Over to you, Matt.
Many thanks for kicking things off, Jerome. Hi, I'm Matt Ebbs-Brewer, a partner in our corporate team at Appleby and a member of the Technology and Innovation team. As Jerome mentioned, I'm going to be providing a brief overview of the digital asset framework here in Bermuda. I think it's fair to say that there have been varying approaches across the globe to the regulation of digital assets, or otherwise. In Bermuda, digital asset business is regulated by the Digital Asset Business Act, and that regulates people carrying on digital asset business in or from within Bermuda. As an aside, I should mention for those interested in carrying on digital asset issuances, token offerings, etc., that's covered by a separate statute in Bermuda, which isn't going to be the focus of today's discussion. As I noted, at a high level, the Digital Asset Business Act in Bermuda regulates the carrying on of digital asset business in or from Bermuda, and essentially that's people carrying on a variety of businesses that touch or involve digital assets. By way of example, that could be facilitating the issuance or redemption of tokens, that could be operating an exchange, that could be carrying on the services of custody wallets, a whole range of activities. And what I think is a really nice feature of Bermuda's approach is that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach to regulation. What do I mean by that? Well, in Bermuda, we have a range of licenses. We have the standard Class F license, which is your full license, but then we have what we call the Class M license, which is a kind of modified license. And that allows people to get licensed in Bermuda and carry on business, albeit with some additional restrictions, whilst recognizing that perhaps they're not in a place to comply fully with the framework. We also have what we call the Class T license. The Class T license is a test or pilot license, which allows people to do proof of concept type activities. What we find really nice is that this environment embraces all types of business. You can have the people that have an idea, they prove that concept, and then they work their way through the licenses. However, there are going to be others that are already active in the sector, already have the experience, they already have the policies and procedures, and they can proceed straight to the full license. So there really are opportunities across the spectrum. Now, in terms of the licensing itself, it has a number of components. We're sure that you'd be familiar with a number of those if you've had to get licensed in other sectors, in other jurisdictions. For example, you're going to need a business plan. You're going to set out how your business is going to be managed, and then you have to have appropriate AML, ATF policies. Now, in addition to that, the Bermuda Monetary Authority is entitled to request a number of other documents and information that it might reasonably require in order to assess an application. A number of those are already clearly set out in the application itself. And a number of those would be definitely familiar to people, things like incorporation documentation and the like. Now, I think it goes without saying that making sure that your application is as good as it can be, as complete, accurate, and detailed as possible is very important. But we thought, in terms of this session, people would get more out of not focusing so much on our experience of the technical requirements and an explanation of what the application must contain and what the applicant must satisfy. We thought it would be beneficial to see what our clients have experienced in actually going through the practical process of obtaining the licenses. And therefore, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Kit Cunningham, who is also a member of our team, who will introduce you to our client. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Matt. Hi, Stephen. Thanks for joining us today. Before we get started, would you mind sharing a little bit about yourself and your role with the Bermuda company?
Sure. So, Stephen Stonberg, I'm the CEO of Bittrex Global, which is kind of a global group of collection of companies, one of which is a Bermuda incorporated entity of which I'm CEO.
Thanks, Stephen. So let's get straight into it. As a member of the Appleby team in Bermuda, I've worked with clients through the digital asset license application process. But what were your initial thoughts on Bermuda's license requirements as stipulated in the Bermuda Digital Asset Business Act?
So, again, Bermuda wasn't our first jurisdiction where we decided to set up a licensed entity. So we had some familiarity with other jurisdictions, which we can talk about. But I think initial thoughts were it was pretty standard in a good way. It was it was a very high bar, which we knew we could pass because we're in other difficult jurisdictions. We wanted that because the nice thing about those, if once you're in, it sort of keeps out the less qualified people from the ecosystem. So we thought that was a great selling point. So again, I think it was in line with what we expected. And we had pretty high expectations given that the jurisdiction is very big in insurance and other global industries. And frankly, that was part of the value proposition of Bermuda.
Great. So seeing as, the application requirements were kind of what you were expected, how would you compare the Bermuda's license requirements to other jurisdictions that Bittrex is licensed in, such as Luxembourg or the US?
Actually, Liechtenstein, not Luxembourg, but that's okay. Everyone else it gets confused. Two small tax havens in Europe, but we're in Liechtenstein, and obviously we're in a bunch of jurisdictions in the U.S. and we were briefly actually in Malta. So we've had a lot of multi-jurisdictional and multi-state experience. Again, I think in a good way, it was very straightforward. I mean, Bermuda is quite an established jurisdiction. Unlike places like Seychelles, which is not really known for much, but seems to be a crypto haven now. It's not a jurisdiction which doesn't really have corporate governance and kind of the things one would expect in a developed jurisdiction. So again, I think that the process was very straightforward. Obviously, I think there's multiple law firms on the island to help you with this. We found obviously Appleby was very knowledgeable and made a very smooth process. And luckily, this wasn't our first rodeo. So, most of the documents on the UBOs and this sort of standard stuff, we kind of already had. So I'd say nothing unexpected, and it was pretty smooth sailing. I think the challenge for us was that we decided to set up a company in Bermuda. I was there for a set of meetings. It was the last day that Hamilton was open before COVID shut. So I think we had the whole COVID experience, which again, irrespective of the current situation, we found one of the benefits of Bermuda was that it was pretty open during COVID, vis-a-vis the US or Europe even. So again, pretty good experience.
Great. And speaking of openness, what did you think of Bermuda Monetary Authority's willingness to have pre-application discussions with Bittrex regarding its digital asset activities in Bermuda?
Great. In fact, I met, that last day when I was in Hamilton, I actually met in person with Moad from the BMA. I think they were very supportive during the process. I think digital assets is pretty new everywhere. And, we were probably one of the first, other than I think Circle, one of the first kind of big international exchanges to look at Bermuda. So, I think it's a learning process for everybody involved, but it's been great. They've been hugely supportive, very communicative, again, especially during COVID. And, we found, Craig Swan, who's going to be, taking over the BMA, very supportive as well. So we've had nothing but, really, really good experience. I think it's an extremely knowledgeable regulator, given that they're running, this whole insurance industry and they have a lot of people they've brought in for crypto. So, I caution anyone who thinks they're just going to come in and think it's like the Seychelles with coconuts or something like don't come to Bermuda. I mean, I'd say they're very smart, very detail oriented. So again, it makes it a challenge, but in a good way.
Great. And Bittrex has had its license now, a Class F license issued by the Bermuda Monetary Authority for a little over a year now. And where do you see the fintech market going from here?
I mean, obviously, it's not just a fintech and crypto. I mean, obviously, crypto and blockchain is just going to continue to grow and grow. I think that, and again, the reason we chose Bermuda and we're also in Liechtenstein for similar reasons, we have a large part of our clientele, even though Bittrex is founded in the US and is a US based company, most of our clients and listing teams are not US. So we don't want to subject them to the US regulations. It makes no sense. So we want regulations. We want good, clear, stable regulations. We found, for token projects, the EU is much clearer than the US. Like Ripple is a utility token. It's just black and white. Whereas you don't have all this SEC uncertainty. And then Gensler coming out yesterday and saying he's not sure if there should be a crypto industry. And that's just not really a great environment to be running a crypto business. So we find, Liechtenstein and then Bermuda having an offshore jurisdiction with a good rule of law, with a good regulator, where it's very clear regulation, that's a huge competitive advantage. And these businesses are global and they're digital. So you can have a global clientele from Bermuda and Liechtenstein, and why not? So I think that the more that places like the US don't have clear regulation, by having clear, good regulation, good, anti-money laundering policies and a real regulator in place, huge competitive advantage. I expect Bermuda to continue to punch above its weight in crypto like it's doing in insurance.
Yes, and over the last year since Bittrex has been licensed here in Bermuda, we've seen the Bermuda Monetary Authority amend the Digital Asset Business Act and continue to grow with the industry as a whole. So would it be fair to say, or what are your thoughts on, do you see Bermuda being well situated to grow with the market and the industry as a whole?
Absolutely. So I think what originally attracted us to Bermuda, since we already have an entity in Liechtenstein, which is licensed. I mean, Liechtenstein is an EEA member state, so it's EU. So we get EU passporting, and the EU is already working on some sort of passporting regime. So that's great. We need to be there in order to do business in Europe with, almost 400 million people. But then we also have the rest of the world, and the rest of the world, we're finding that we don't necessarily want to book them through Liechtenstein because it has things that make sense for the EU clients, but it's problematic for, let's say, Chinese mainland, or again, everyone who can get through KYC, but for other jurisdictions, it's not a great place. So I think we're really looking at Bermuda. We originally started because it has the flexibility and allows security tokens, right? Any token is a token under DABA. So that's much more flexible than you would find in Europe. But then on top of that, we're finding for certain countries, it's much better to book the clients in Bermuda. And we're thinking of moving a significant part of our sort of existing utility token business out of Liechtenstein permanently into Bermuda. So ramping up volume. So I think Bermuda, if you want sort of a regulated place to do business globally, maybe outside EU where you'll need some licenses, but that's a great competitive advantage, again, versus places like Seychelles with these light touch or no regulation, which or Aruba or Antigua, which is the other one. I mean, these are not places where a lot of big crypto exchanges are running businesses out of there. And I think they're going to find a lot of problems with regulators because that's, no regulation is, you might as well not even pretend, right? So I think, if you want to have serious regulation, be in a real jurisdiction, to be outside of the United States, where you can have, global clientele, which again, that's very characteristic of insurance, which you already have that set up there for, 30, 40, 50 years. That's a huge competitive advantage. That's why we're in Bermuda.
Great, thanks, Stephen. It's always appreciated to hear the insights from a successful applicant. So I'd like to thank you again for joining us today and pass it back to Jerome. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Kit. That was really enlightening conversation with Stephen. I'm pleased to be joined now by Sean Stapley, who is a principal or partner at Penrose Partners. Sean, welcome.
Jerome, thanks for the invitation. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Before we get started, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what it is that you guys do over there at Penrose Partners?
Yeah, happy to give a little bit of flavor. So Penrose Partners is an emerging tech advisory firm. We work to essentially translate a lot of the narrative from our technical founders, from our clients, from our partners, into helping people understand just what the advantages of blockchain and how best they can apply it to their own lives. So we've been doing this for quite a few years now with myself and my co-founder, Jerome. Myself, I'm actually a Bermudian-born entrepreneur. So I've been working in the space for about 5-6 years now. So I've seen plenty of the ups and downs. And overall, Jerome and I have really got a good sense of where the industry is going. We're lucky to work with some incredible clients, some great partners like yourselves at Appleby, and many of the others that are joining us for the Tech Summit. And frankly, it's great to see that a lot of the business community has really embraced the digital asset side of the space in Bermuda. And it's honestly, it's a refreshing take to actually get to work back in the island where I was born. So very excited to see where things go from here. And huge shout out to the government, to Premier Bert, and frankly, really almost all of the private sector as well, who have embraced it so far. And fingers crossed for it to be 100% soon enough.
Thank you. No, that is great. And so why don't we start with something you mentioned. So you are client facing. You see and talk to a lot of people who are interested in getting into this space or broadening their businesses and their enterprises in this space. So you're pretty much on the cutting edge of things, I would say. So what are some of the trends that you're seeing in fintech at the moment, and what the conversations that you're having on a sort of day-to-day basis with clients?
Absolutely. So I mean, one big part that we've seen really in the last, I would say last year to year and a half, has been far more of a conversation around adoption and education. Previously, people had been, I think, involved in the space for, this idea of this magic internet money. What are all these things? How does it come together? But in the last year and a half, it's become much more mainstream. And I think that's incredible. People are getting involved. People are seeing the use cases. People are actually learning about blockchain, how it works, and how it can apply to things like payments and cutting down costs on that side, to all the sorts of things around digital identity and being able to actually own your own data. But we've also seen a lot of growth from institutions that are open to new sorts of projects, to new sorts of yields. I think, for example, in the banking sector, we've been speaking with several of our partners on island who they're exploring the DeFi space, which I think would have been unfathomable 5 years ago. I think the big conversation now is really around user adoption. And as we've seen with, we've done some work with both our clients over at Badali and with Goslings on island to actually do some feasibility studies. And really from there, I think we're entering a space where people are recognizing that this doesn't just have to be these people gathering on the internet and talking about the secretive type of new magic money. It very much is this new growing trend of innovation in the space that can really improve a lot of lives over a wide array of industries. So that's honestly, the conversations has been much more consumer focused and on the individual. And I think that's a really good trend that's shifting in.
No, absolutely. I think that is going to be key to sort of going forward, is just sort of wide adoption and understanding from the consumers. And you mentioned Goslings there. So is it that we'll be paying for our dark and stormies pretty soon with
fingers crossed? Yeah, no, the work with them was incredible as well. The team was really helpful, and to provide a little bit more light on that project, our partner over at Badali is essentially having a multi-currency bank in your pocket, and they enable you to build upon and to use blockchain networks such as Bitcoin, such as Ethereum, and others to pay with crypto for your coffees, for meals, or whatever you may like. In this case, we actually were able to distribute essentially these digital dollars that could then be redeemed for Gosling's welcome package. So a nice little bottle of black rum, some ginger beer, and for a lot of our partners that were visiting, it was great to be able to welcome them in as this idea of come use your crypto and actually take part in spending this locally and being able to adopt this technology. Goslings was really willing to play ball, and from there I think we're looking at other partners on island. We're looking at how we can best spin this up, and for any local businesses that are looking into the space, I think it's an excellent opportunity to really see the advantages of just using these streamlined payments, cutting down the processing fees, and making it a much more seamless experience.
That's great. And so, just touching on the sort of, you mentioned the Bermuda market space a lot in this. So do you see, or how do you see the sort of regulatory space, so the BMA, the Bermuda government, and their sort of efforts in pushing this out and in creating an environment for this to be successful?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess there's a couple points then. First and foremost, I think having Premier Bert be open to the industry and very vocal about seeing the advantages involved, I think has created a lot of confidence for many of the partners that we work with around the world to look at Bermuda and say, not only can we see the advantages that are clear with using the Digital Asset Business Act, covered in much better detail by the lawyers in this panel. But really trying to figure out, how does it work with an established international business community? And really from our experience so far in the space, the BMA has been wonderful to have these open discussions with, as Stephen touched on, being able to have the discussions for an open dialogue before even going through the application process has really been a wonderful step up. We've had clients that were working in other jurisdictions, in Switzerland, in Singapore, and elsewhere, that we're looking to expand. And I think, frankly, upon seeing kind of the openness of Craig Swan, of AXA, Zubair, Moad Fahmy, and all the rest of the team, they realized that Bermuda is open for business. And that's really, frankly, the most welcoming space that we've seen. I try not to be biased, having been born here, but we have explored extensively around the world and seen where else works. And frankly, Bermudians are just the most welcoming across the space. So, I think really with that, a lot of the work that we've tried to do as well, and, especially with our partners over at i3, the innovation incubator that we've been working with for about a year now. So Aaron Smith and Gail Gorman have been wonderful, and they're in partnership with the Bermuda government. So being able to bring this all in, and for having i3 as this center of excellence, essentially, for these blossoming blockchain businesses, has really provided a foundation that being able to work with these earlier stage firms and then introduce them to firms like yourselves, to some partners over at Bittrex, and really to help essentially just grow the community. That's really been the main focus, has been that we found that, at least in Bermuda, everyone's open about what they're working on, about their discussions, about what's going well. And it's really allowed us to focus not on anyone trying to take a larger slice of the pie, but just making the pie a lot larger.
No, absolutely, and we did, participate in one of those i3 discussions, and it is very invigorating, and it's kind of being in that early adopter field and early adopter environment is something about it which is just a lot of hope, and talking to people with a lot of hope kind of invigorates you as an individual. So I think that's great, and we look forward to the success of that and to the continued growth of that in the jurisdiction. So just switching gears a little bit here, so it's safe to say that you deal with clients, or you speak with people who are interested in a number of jurisdictions, and who are, maybe considering Bermuda versus Cayman versus some of the other jurisdictions that Stephen mentioned in his discussion. So the question to anyone listening today is, or for you to sort of talk to them about, is why Bermuda? Why here? I know we're biased. I know you're a little bit biased as being Bermudian, but putting that aside for the time being, why Bermuda?
Yeah, of course. The big question, why come here? Well, apart from the beautiful scenery that you have around you just working on the island, frankly, I can really hammer it down to a couple main points. As I said, first and foremost, the clear regulatory environment is something that, compared to what we've seen over with the SEC and with Gary Gensler in the States, as Stephen mentioned, what we've seen over in Asian markets, Bermuda's open, Bermuda's clear, and Bermuda's trying to be that premier blockchain jurisdiction. And I do genuinely think that they're set themselves up to be as well prepared as you can in an industry that is as fast moving as this is. So a huge shout out to the BMA again, and to the government for really being open to this. But more than that, we've also seen the growth of the international business community being able to be open to this. We've had some great discussions with various partners in the private space. Aside from the law firms on island, even working with some of the banks here has been wonderful. Having to open discussions with the compliance departments has been great. Just saying, look, we understand your concerns. We understand, the existing regulations. I think for a lot of what we're trying to do, we're looking to say, we don't necessarily want to bring this in as though everyone's trying to say, all right, we're burning down the banks, we're taking down the institutions. It's not that. It's very much, it's a collaboration, and that's where we found this nice little niche. So really within Bermuda, everyone's open to play ball, and that's a wonderful part about this. And finally, realistically, I think the other aspect that's great here is the talent, the expertise. You can wander down the street, and wandering through a couple coffee shops, you're going to meet CEOs of businesses that are structured from around the world that are all on island, and having this incredible growth of talent locally, not only from being able to work with local groups like Connect Tech, and seeing the challenges that that they face and the adoption for getting children of all ages to learn about this space and to code, I think really, from a bottoms up approach and the real grassroots focus, Bermuda's talent is where the future lies for this. And being able to, again, focus on this education and this adoption, for my generation, we grew up with, seeing the internet as it's growing. I think for a lot of them, they're going to now grow up with blockchain just being an intrinsic part of their lives. Yeah. And from there, I think really that's where a lot of the focus is going to be, is that with this growth and with this focus, Bermuda is so well positioned to be this premier blockchain jurisdiction.
Thank you very much for that answer, Sean. I couldn't have said better myself. I see that we've come to the end of our time. So thanks very much for agreeing to join us today. For anyone who's interested, Sean can be contacted at penrosepartners.com. He'll also be in the chat. So if you want to have a direct chat with him now, please feel free to reach out to him. Again, thanks, Sean. And we look forward to seeing you again at the conference.
Thanks, Jerome. It's great to be here.